Welcome back to another edition of the Penn State 365 podcast. I'm your host, Richie Allar, and joined as always when we're talking Penn State football recruiting, and my co-host, Dylan Callahan-Crawley of HappyValleyInsider.com. We are now one day away, probably approaching the 24-hour mark when you're probably starting to listen to this, but until Penn State is in the second round of the college football playoff, they're taking on Boise State down in Phoenix, Arizona in the Fiesta Bowl. Dylan, high-level thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I think it's a really intriguing matchup here for the quarterfinal round. Probably of the 4 games taking place this week, and I think has the biggest chance of maybe being a one-sided game here in favor of Penn State. If I had to guess, I think both teams are going to kind of have a similar game plan in terms of what the way they want to win this one. For Penn State, obviously it's going to come down to stopping Ashton Jeanty, but then I think also trying to establish the run on the offensive side of the ball, and then for Boise State, they're absolutely going to have to slow down Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen. This is one of the worst tackling teams in the country in Boise State. They haven't faced 2 running backs as good as Allen and Singleton this year, or as physical, I would have to argue. So I think that is a mismatch potentially against this Boise State defense. And then obviously the Broncos are going to look to give the ball to Ashton Jeanty 5,000 times in this game and hope that he can run wild. I don't think that's going to happen. I'll say that right now. But yeah, I think it's going to be a really intriguing matchup. But I think it's one that Penn State. I've been saying it for a few days now. I think this is one that in a not a perfect world, but in my opinion, this is a game that Penn State should absolutely win, and win in dominant fashion. This is a good Boise State team, but this is not a Boise State team that has been dominant for the last month of the season. Now they have had 4 weeks off since we last saw them play, or 3 weeks off. So that's going to help, especially with Ashton Jeanty after having almost 350 carries in the regular season. But yeah, I think this is a matchup that Penn State has a chance to put together another dominant victory like they did against SMU.
Yeah, no, you said it right from the start. Ashton Jeanty is unstoppable, basically. The last 2 games they played, 30-plus carries. He actually went over 30-plus carries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 times this season. The only team that's really been able to slow him down is UNLV. They held him to 3.9 yards per carry, but he still went for 120. Ran for 100.
And that was only after seeing him for this. Was that the second time or the first time?
First time.
First time, okay.
Second time they gave up 6.5 yards per carry. So they did face 2 Power 5 teams this year. Washington State gave up 26 carries for 259 yards, which is 10 yards per carry. And then Oregon couldn't even stop them. And Oregon's got a solid defense. I'm not going to say they're very stout or great, or even. I would say they're just above average. But they gave up 192 yards to him. So that's got to be priority number one, is just stopping him. And can they do that with this defense under Tom Allen?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the best run defenses in the country. And, they've been facing tremendous rushing attacks all season. We saw them face SMU just a couple days ago, and they shut down that SMU rushing attack. And Brashard Smith, maybe not Ashton Jeanty, but still pretty damn good. So are they going to completely shut him down? No. I imagine he gets over 100 yards in this game, but yeah. I don't think he's. I mean, what's his season low this year? 128. I think there's a very good chance that he's around that season low. Especially if this turns into a game where Penn State can get out ahead early on. I think that may be the key here for Penn State, is get out to an early 2-score lead in this one, force Boise State to throw you the ball, force Madsen to beat you through the air. And I think if Penn State can do that, then that's where there's a really good chance that it just gets out of hand and Penn State could run away with it if they get an early lead. But yeah, I think Penn State can slow down Ashton Jeanty if I think, I know prop bet isn't legal in Pennsylvania, but if I'm a Penn State fan who lives somewhere where college prop betting is legal, I'd say, hell, throw some money on Jeanty to go under 100 yards in this game. I'm not sure it happens, but I think there is, uh, I think this is by far the best front seven that Boise State has faced, and this Penn State offensive line has dominated. Defensive line and front seven have dominated two really good back-to-back offensive lines their last 2 weeks, and I can see it again. No offense to Boise State, but I mean, it's been a while since they've seen an elite uh, defensive line slash front seven, and obviously being Oregon early this season, and I think that Oregon game is replayed today. It's not even close. So I mean, I see
That's
this. I see this as a matchup that really favors Penn State in that run game regard. A little worried about the tackling at times. Penn State does miss their fair share of tackles, but um, no team misses more tackles than Boise State. So
fair.
that's if I'm worried about somebody tackling, it's going to be Boise State tackling Penn State, and not vice versa. But Jeanty does not go down easy, so Penn State will have to be fundamental in their tackling.
For what it's worth, I am in a state that does allow player prop bets. It is 125.5 over under for Jeanty. I think you have to go into this one assuming he's at least getting 100, and
Yeah,
just kind of just let you can't let him run wild, of course, but I do think that you are able to stop him, and I do think this linebacker core is going to help a lot with that. I think Tony
yeah.
Rojas is athletic enough that he can kind of find Jeanty. Jeanty doesn't have really top end speed.
No,
It's
he's just
it's more the
so.
vision.
It's the vision. He's just so damn hard to bring down. I mean,
Yeah.
Penn State's been throwing a lot of respect his way this week. Calling, I mean, Tom Allen called him one of the greatest running backs he'll ever face. James Franklin corrected a reporter and said, who said one of the best running backs in college football this season. He
Mhm.
corrected the reporter and said one of the best running backs in college football history.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Jeanty is a special running back. He is going to get his, but I think if he's probably going to have a big, 20, 30 yard run once or twice in this game. But if Penn State the rest of the way can hold him to, 3, 4 yards per carry, Penn State's going to be in a good position to win this game.
Let's talk about their quarterback, Maddox Madsen, entering year four for, I think, yeah, year four because of the redshirt season. For Boise State, Utah kid, a little bit on the shorter side, 5'10", 203.
Yeah.
What do we think he's really much of a threat at all for this Penn State secondary that's been relatively dominant over the past couple games?
I don't think this Boise State pass attack in general is really much of a threat in this game unless Dirk Cutter really brings out some tricks out of his bag. Madsen's a good, smart quarterback. I mean, 3 interceptions this season. He doesn't throw a ton of turnover-worthy passes, I think, either. Let me look here on PFF quickly. 13 turnover-worthy passes, so maybe one per game.
Yeah.
But it's not certainly the worst in the country. I mean, um, but yeah, so he's not the best quarterback, but he's, I think, been, for what Boise State needs, good enough. But I don't think he's good enough to, if Boise State needs him to win the game on Tuesday, which I think he's going to have some sort of quality impact to win this game. I'm not sure he's good enough to do that against Penn State in this secondary. Because the only offenses that have really been able to have success against the secondary are Oregon and Ohio State. Um, Boise State doesn't have that talent on the outside to match up against this Penn State uh, defense, in my opinion. Madsen, you look at the stats uh, against Oregon earlier this year, 17 for 40, 148 and one touchdown. So while Jeanty had a great day against Oregon, Madsen could not get anything going, nor could this Boise State wide receiver room slash passing attack.
Now, mind you, Kevin Jennings was around the same from SMU. Also had 14, or he had 14 instead of 13 turnover-worthy passes, and Penn State was able to get him uncomfortable, get an interception. So,
If it helps, I don't think Madsen can play as bad as Kevin Jennings played on
fair.
Tuesday. I mean, but I don't expect Madsen to go out there and carve up this Penn State defense either.
Fair. Now, he does have a little bit of a running ability, too. He did run for 220 yards, 5 touchdowns on the season, had 2 other
He
rushing touchdowns
does.
last year. So
He
you got to
does.
watch him escaping from the pocket a little bit. And
Yeah,
I think,
he does have a little bit more mobility to his game. Maybe not as mobile as you would think for a guy who's that small at quarterback, but
mhm.
definitely has some rushing abilities in his game. I mean, he had looking here, 55 yards against Nevada, 54 yards against UNLV. So he can take off and run, but I, I he hasn't had to face Abdul Carter or deny Dennis Sutton on the outside, and then Penn State's linebackers are playing their best football this season and quickly. I think Tony Rojas doesn't play a ton against the run lately, but I think he could be an X factor in this game. He's been playing the best football of his career the last 3 weeks. Obviously, had that big game against SMU. I could see another really solid game out of Tony Rojas, and if he continues to play like that, it makes Penn State's defense all that much scarier. And I honestly think, I mean, let's be honest, all the defenses really across the board of the major title contenders right now. So Georgia, Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State, Texas, all are all elite. But I think this Penn State defense has an argument to be the best defense in the country, right up there with Ohio State.
Yeah, I think the biggest reason I always like to point out like teams or the quarterback's mobility is for the sole fact that Penn State has such a powerful edge rushing attack
Yeah.
and just a pass rush attack in general across the line. But they're going to get uncomfortable and they're going to have to roll out of this pocket.
Yeah.
They're going to have to move around.
But like with Jennings, and Penn State did a good job of this with Jennings, is you can't over pursue when in the pocket, when trying to get into the pocket, because if you over pursue and allow lane to get open on the left or right, that could allow that lane for Matson to take off and get some valuable yardage.
Mhm.
So it'll be interesting to see. I'm interested to see, and I think obviously we didn't see Boise State struggle with it too much earlier this season, but this is going to be one of the faster teams that Boise State has faced all season.
Mhm.
I do wonder how they handle the speed of this Penn State defense.
Yeah. Flipping it over, the Penn State offense versus this Boise State defense.
Yeah.
Now, their Boise State defense actually puts up good numbers in opposing points per game, only 21.9. But I'm looking now, they do give up 360 plus passing yards per game, and that's where I feel like Penn State can really expose their
I
secondary.
think you
But
mean
they
260?
no, oh yeah, 260. I'm sorry, 250, 250.
250? Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking at
I was
the
going to
total
say
yards.
360
Yeah,
passing
yeah, I was
yards.
like, yeah,
Jeez.
yeah, I read that wrong.
Oh,
That's where
yeah.
I feel like Penn State can really expose things. Now they do have a really good cornerback in. I gotta look up his name again. Jeremiah Irby. They have a really good safety in Sa'i Oladipo. So they do have a good secondary, but I do think Drew is going to really be able to expose these guys. Now, who's the wide receiver that exposes them? That's the biggest question mark.
Yeah, I 100% agree. This is a Boise State defense that, has a really good defensive line. I mean, number 2 in the country in sacks this season. They
Hmm.
create chaos. Um, Front seven is solid overall, but that secondary really is a major weakness. And that's 250 yards allowed per game to Mountain West Conference opponent. I mean, they allowed 446 passing yards to San Jose State. Uh, and I couldn't tell you who San Jose State's quarterback was this season. I mean, 372 to Utah State, 327 to Washington. Okay, Washington State, understandable. Georgia Southern, 322. I mean, this is a pass defense that is absolutely one that Penn State could take advantage of. Now, SMU's pass defense wasn't that great either. Penn State couldn't get anything going through the air. Now, I do think the weather in that game had an impact on the passing attack. Now, this one being the dome, you look at what Drew has done in dome settings in his career, or not when he's not exposed to the elements. 292 against Michigan State, 295 against Mississippi last year, 226 against Oregon. I mean, he plays well when he is not exposed to the elements, and I think that could be someone watching this one. Now, who's going to be the wide receiver who takes advantage of the Boise State defense, I don't know. That your guess is mine. I think they're gonna have a solid game plan for Tyler Warren, try to take him out of the game. Obviously, though Warren is one of the top guys there, but I think it's gonna be a combination of Harrison Wallace and then maybe Singleton and Allen coming out of the backfield, making an impact in that regard. But yeah, I mean that's going to be the kind of the big talking point of see, depending on how far Penn State goes the rest of the way here, is who's going to be the wide receiver that steps up. You could win a national championship playing the ground and pound. We just saw it with Michigan last year, and I think if Penn State is going to win it all this year, that's kind of the avenue they have to go. They have to go the ground and pound, and Drew then, when called upon, has to just be a reliable passer. Guys have to get open enough so he can make some plays with his arm, but yeah, I mean, it is a question of who's going to step up in this game because, I mean, you only have one wide receiver, not counting Warren, who has over 20 receptions this season. You look at SMU just last week, had 8 players this season with 20 plus receptions. I mean, Penn State has 3. It is still a concern now. It's something they've addressed in the transfer portal, and I think we both agree that assuming Harrison Wallace stays next season, they have a really good trio of wide receivers there. But that doesn't help now, and it is a major question mark. I think they're going to have success, though, whether it is a Wallace or somebody steps up, an Amari Evans, Liam Clifford, Julian Fleming, whoever steps up, whoever it may be, but somebody's going to have to step up here outside Tyler Warren, I think. Trey Wallace as well has been pretty reliable, but Penn State, really, if they're going to make a run here to the national championship, potentially win it all, is going to need a second receiver to really emerge. This is a better time than ever to start that emergence.
Yeah. So, speaking of stepping up, Nolan Rucci stepped up big time in that first game. Highest ranked offensive lineman per PFF in the round 1 of college football playoff games. Can he do it again? Because he's going to face, this entire offensive line is going to face a very potent defensive line. Like you said, they're top not top in the nation. They're one of the top 2 in the nation in sacks. Looking at their defensive ends, Jaden Virgin has 10 this year, and Ahmed Hassanin, I don't know how to pronounce shit, to be honest with you. Hassanin, he was defensive tackle for his first 3 years. Now he moved to defensive end. You don't really see that too often. But this season he moved to defensive end, and he has 21 sacks over the past 2 seasons. So combine those two, that's 31 sacks over 2 seasons. Like, that is very impressive, and that's going to be hard to stop. I know it's Mountain West football. It's not Big Ten football, but that's still going to be a very potent pass rush to stop.
Yeah, here's something about Hassanin.
That sounds better.
Last 5 games, 1 sack.
That's okay. Good point.
One sack last 5 games, 4 tackles for a loss. He was down, kind of reversed Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter kind of started slow this season, if everybody remembers, and then around the Illinois game, kind of just turned it on and has been an animal ever since. Hassanin had a sack in...
I mean, 3 of his 8.5 came against Power 5 competition, to be fair.
True. He had sacks in 5 straight games at one point. If you go half a sack, 7 straight games, but has struggled the last month of the season. Now, they, like I said, with Jeanty, they've had it off for 4 weeks. 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is. That is incredibly beneficial. I mean, going back to Jeanty, just for Jeanty, that's incredibly beneficial. A guy who has had 350 carries gets 4 weeks off. I mean, he's going to be incredibly fresh. But going back to the Boise State defense and this Nolan Rucci matchup, I think if we didn't have these last 2 games of evidence on tape, probably would have been worried. But he's really stepped it up against Oregon and SMU in terms of his pass block. I mean, just 2 pressures allowed, no sacks. He's had 234 pass blocking snaps this year, 1 sack allowed, 13 pressures. I mean, he at times it hasn't looked pretty, but he's been really good these last 3 games, going back to that Maryland game, and he's playing with a lot of confidence. And that's maybe he allows a sack in this game. I mean, Drew Shelton allowed his first 2 career sacks last week. It's going to happen, but I think overall, I trust Noah Rucci to get it done here.
That was going to be my next question. I know Rucci's been very dominant lately. Do we trust Shelton? Because there's been some issues this season with Shelton, to be fair.
Yeah, Drew Shelton is an interesting case. It kind of reminds me of Jalen Kimber defensively, that it's never going to look necessarily pretty, or it's never going to grade out well on like the PFF levels of things.
Mm-hmm.
But he does tend to get the job done. 17 pressures allowed this season, so they've played 15 games already this season. 14?
14. No.
12-2, 14 games.
Yeah.
So a little over 1 per game, just 2 sacks. Those came against SMU. Those were the first 2 sacks of his career allowed. So yeah, it may not look pretty at all times, but I think the numbers are the numbers. And it's not like Drew Shelton hasn't faced elite defensive lines in his career. He's good at not allowing sacks, and it helps that Drew gets the ball out quickly.
Yeah. Before we go to predictions, give me an X factor for Penn State on offense.
Yeah, it's the running backs. Let's be honest here, it's the running backs. As mentioned, this is one of the worst tackling teams in the country in Boise State, and that's going to be something I'm going to watch out for. As I mentioned at the top, this is a running back duo they have not faced the level of this season. This running back duo of Kaytron Allen and Nicholas Singleton has been phenomenal the last, even dating back to the Washington game. They've been playing pretty good football, but the last 2 weeks they've been dominant. A lot of people go back to the SMU game and say Penn State's offense wasn't special, didn't do this, didn't do that. But first quarter was definitely ugly, but second and third quarter, Penn State's rushing attack was doing what they did against Oregon to SMU. And I see no reason to believe that can't be the case again on Tuesday against Boise State, especially when you look at Boise State's missed tackle issues. I mean, looking at it here, they have 10 players with 10-plus missed tackles this season. Of those, there are 4 front 7 members, and the rest are safeties. I mean, if I'm Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, I'm licking my chops for this matchup, because I think there's a chance that they break off numerous big runs in this game, and that's where I think the blowout factor comes into hand. I think Penn State tries to set up the run early in this game, and I mean, if you're Penn State, why not just try to bully your way to a blowout victory? And I think it's possible, unless this Boise State defense fixed their tackling issues all season. But I mean, 168 missed tackles this season for Boise State. That is a astonishing amount of missed tackles for a team that has 1 loss. Now, they've been able to, overcome those missed tackles, but the fact that they've had that many missed tackles, now you have to go up against a very physical Penn State rushing attack. I think that's bad news for Boise State all day. By the way, that's a 23.8% missed tackle rate for Boise State this season. And I think that may be the difference in this game, is just the missed tackles. You look at Penn State, they've missed their own amount of tackles this season, but have played, and they have an extra game this season, but let's see what their missed tackle percentage is at.
It's got to be around like 13, 14, maybe not even that high, to be honest with you.
It's about 19%.
Okay, wow, higher than I thought.
But I would have to look at it from a game perspective. But I do feel Penn State has been very, very good in the missed tackle category the last few weeks, especially against SMU. Had some missed tackles against Oregon. But outside of Jeanty, who has, I think, forced an insane amount of missed tackles this year. Let me quickly look it up. It was an insane amount.
I mean, yeah, he's basically a bowling ball that just kind of bounces off the pins.
Yeah, exactly. 135 missed tackles this season for Ashton Jeanty. But I think I trust Penn State's defense here to wrap up Jeanty more than I trust Boise State's defense to find a way to bring down Singleton and Allen consistently. And Penn State's missed tackle problem really isn't, uh, you know, in the on the defensive line. It's more of the linebackers, and one of their biggest, you know, one of the guys who struggled most with missed tackles this season has been Tony Rojas, and he
Mm-hmm.
has missed now I think just one tackle since the Ohio State game. I mean,
I was gonna ask you the X factor for defense, but I feel like you kind of just hit on the linebacker core there.
yeah, I think it's going to be linebacker core. I don't want to say Rojas particularly because Rojas, like I said, hasn't played a ton against the run in
Mm-hmm.
recent weeks. You look at his snap breakdown. He had 31 snaps against the run against Oregon, but 15 against SMU, 11 against Maryland, 25 Minnesota, 15 Purdue, Washington 11. And then earlier this season, he was averaging 20 plus a game against the run. So they noticed he obviously was struggling a little bit more against the run,
Yep.
limited his role in that capacity. He's been flourishing the last few weeks. Um, yeah, I'm going to say linebacker room because I trust the defensive line to get it done, but it's going to be up to the linebacker room to really be the ones to bring down Jeanty. I think you could point out somebody like Ezekiel Wheatley who needs to have a big game. He has struggled with missed tackles this season as well. 15 according to PFF, had 4 I think against Oregon. But the rest of their guys who have been, the big missed tackle guys have really strengthened their game in the last
Mm-hmm.
couple weeks and have really put those missed tackles behind them for the most part. So I'm not too worried about Penn State in that regard.
Gotcha. All right, 11 actually opened at 11 points. It actually changed already to 11 and a half in the spread. Penn State's obviously favored, 53 and a half over under. I personally think the over hits, but what are we thinking here? Penn State probably wins, but by how much?
I've been saying for a couple of days to a couple of friends that I think Penn State should roll in this game. I mentioned it on here. I think Penn State should roll. All things considered, this Boise State team has not been playing their best football for about a
Mm,
month. This Penn State team has been playing really dominant football for the most part since that Ohio State loss, despite the Oregon loss. If they can slow down Jeanty, there's no reason Penn State cannot win this in blowout fashion. And I think they're going to slow down Jeanty enough. Um, it's what 11 and a half points right now. I think Penn
yeah.
State, and this is not an SMU disrespect thing. SMU is a good team. I think the SMU don't count us out type stuff is cheesy. I mean, you're the number 3 seed in the college football playoffs. Like,
You mean Boise State?
come on, like, come on. What are we doing here? Um,
You said
but this
SMU.
Penn State
You
team
mean
is a legitimate national title contender. One that I've picked to get to the national championship game. I think they win this 34-17.
all right? That's what I was kind of thinking too. I was thinking that 12-point spread could be weird with like a garbage time touchdown. I
Yeah.
was thinking more like I want to say 35-21. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt that they're going to score points, but not too many. I don't know because I was pretty confident they were going to blow out SMU, and
They did.
I probably should have made it a bigger like gap than I did. So I'm going to be more confident in this one, and I'm going to say 35-20. I'm
All
going to
right.
say that because they do have a good field goal kicker. I mean, he's 63 of 63 on PATs, which is pretty impressive, and then 13 of 16 on the year from field goal range.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and not gonna have the elements
that
to
helps too.
factor the game like we saw against SMU, where SMU also has a reliable field goal kicker. He misses a very makeable kick because it's basically kicking a watermelon.
Yeah.
Um, uh, yeah, I, I think it could be worse than my final score prediction. I honestly do.
Hmm.
But uh, let's be honest. If Penn State brings their A game in this one, it should not be a close game. It should not be a close game. Penn State
Agree.
is. Boise State's a really good team, but Penn State is very much one of the top 4 teams in this country. A true national title contender, and I think they roll to the Orange Bowl. And unlike this game, I will be in Miami for the Orange Bowl if Penn State does make that. So we'll see what happens there. But I think we're going to be talking about Penn State and the Orange Bowl in a couple days.
looking way too far ahead, you prefer Notre Dame or Georgia? I know Georgia's a little banged up right now, but it's still Georgia at the
Yeah,
end of
no,
the day.
that I would probably prefer Notre Dame if I was Penn State.
Really? Hmm.
Yeah. Um, and I know redshirt freshman quarterback, whatever Gunnar Stockton is right now.
Yeah.
Um, I know Stockton freshman, but I st Penn State we've seen struggles with speed still at times.
Hmm.
Ohio State, Oregon. I know Georgia doesn't have the weapons they've had in the years past, but that team still has a ton of speed on both sides of the ball, and which I think could be a problem. Kirby Smart is probably the best head coach. He is definitely the best head coach left in the college football playoffs. Um, and I would not want to face Kirby Smart if I was Penn State. And I wouldn't want to face what Georgia has is the experience. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that even without um, Beck, they have the experience. Now, you could argue the most important position they don't have the experience at for the college football playoffs, but everybody else has been there and done that. This is not
True.
nothing new to Georgia, so I think that's something you have to consider. Um, if it's a Penn State Orange Bowl, I mean, could be a significant Georgia advantage in terms of fans, though Penn State
Hmm.
fans will travel well. Um, but I think Notre Dame is a better matchup because I think Penn State can slow down the Notre Dame rush and attack. Now, I would not be worried about Riley Leonard having to throw the ball against his Penn State secondary, in my opinion. Um, and I think, that's a Notre Dame team that also has suffered a couple notable injuries here of late as well that could affect that game. I would say Notre Dame, um, but I think Penn State could theoretically beat both. But at the beginning of the playoffs, I picked Notre Dame to beat Georgia, so I'm gonna stick with that pick with Notre Dame. Though I have had a feeling the last few days that Georgia is gonna win that one, maybe decisively. But yeah, I'd
Yeah.
say if I'm Penn State, I prefer Notre Dame right now.
Okay. I do find it interesting because Gunnar Stockton has 60 pass attempts in his career between this season and last season. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Hasn't thrown a touchdown this year. He's actually only thrown an interception this year.
Yeah, it was a bad one.
Um,
I mean, almost
yeah,
costing the SEC championship there.
that's true too. Yeah, not great. So it's gonna be interesting to see what that game actually ends up playing out like.
Yeah,
I
I
hate to look
guess,
ahead, but like
I
as
guess,
media we can.
yeah, I guess while we're here, I'm assuming both of us have Texas beating Arizona State.
Yeah, but I don't know. Arizona State's quarterback is something.
Yeah, and Scadabo's pretty damn good himself too.
Yeah.
Um, no, I think I wouldn't be shocked if Arizona State keeps that one closer than I expected,
Like,
but
like
I'm not.
Scadabo's good, but I like their quarterback. I like Levitt. Like I like
Yeah,
Levitt a lot. I don't know how good Texas is realistically.
I think Texas is one of the more overrated teams in left in this. Yes. Um,
Like they said, Penn State got an easy run. They got Clemson in round one, who probably shouldn't have even been there.
yep.
They're going to get Arizona State in round two, who they should probably run past. And then they have to face their tough matchup. Same thing with Penn State. You got SMU in round one, you got Boise State in round two, then you have to face your tough matchup. So
Going to that tough matchup, who you got? Ohio State, Oregon.
I got Oregon. I think they're too good.
Uh, I picked Tennessee to beat Ohio State before the playoffs, so here we are. I don't know if Ohio State plays like they did last week. I have a hard time picking against Ohio State, but at the beginning of the playoffs, I predicted a Penn State Oregon national championship, and I guess there's no reason to go away from that now. So I'm going to also take Oregon to win that. Mostly because at the end of the day, I like to think who has the better coach, who's the
Yep,
better quarterback. Oregon has the
Oregon.
advantage in both. So I'm going to take
Yeah.
Oregon.
I find it wild that Ohio State's favored though. It's not even like
I'm not
it's the Rose Bowl. It's far away. Like it's closer to Oregon. Like
I'm not too surprised, but I wasn't surprised necessarily, but I see why. I think Ohio State, if that game earlier this season was in Columbus or on neutral field, probably wins that game. Um, and Ohio State probably had the most dominant victory of the first round.
yeah,
Um,
but that's
ju-
also
based
Tennessee
off,
coming up from. SEC to Ohio, which is cold, and they actually took over the stadium. I'll give them that. Like,
Yeah. But yeah, I think it was the most dominant in terms of feeling. I mean, Penn State dominated SMU, but it was kind of ugly the first 20 minutes. Um, Ohio State jumped out and never looked back.
fair
And
enough.
so yeah, I'll take Oregon. Though absolutely wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State pulls out. If Ohio State gets past Oregon, I think it's going to be very hard for them to first somebody knock them off. Uh,
I'm gonna give a quick little. We don't really do a whole lot of betting on this pod, but I'm gonna throw some money this weekend. I'm gonna say Arizona State plus 12.5. I don't think they win, but I think they cover. I'll say Oregon. You could go spread if you really want for 2.5, depending. Or what's their money line's probably nicer than the spread actually.
yeah,
Probably Oregon
money line has to be money line would be plus money, so I'd take money.
Penn
For,
State spread, and then I'd probably go Georgia 1.5. I don't know. I might just go over in that. What's the over under in that game? 44. I might just say the over in general.
yeah, yeah, I think that would be not a bad parlay. That's
I hate to sprinkle some money out there. Just so everyone knows, this is not gambling advice because if it was, I wouldn't be here right now. I'd probably be rich. But
yeah, it's not gambling advice. It's just conversation, right? Whatever they say. Um, yeah, let me. So you were saying
I'm trying to put it together real quick.
Arizona State
Um,
plus 12.5, Oregon
yeah,
money line. I got 45 on that over under.
yeah, it's still going over.
Plus 665
I got you.
on
Oh, you
DK.
can't bet on Penn State in state, right?
Oh, you can.
Oh
So
yeah, Penn State spread, Arizona State spread, Oregon money line, and Notre Dame
plus
over under.
1374.
Yeah, plus 1,400 on FanDuel. Just saying.
$100 went you 1400.
That's not bad. It's pretty good money right there. So you know what? Let's see what happens. I'm not saying to bet it, but I'm saying if I were a college football bettor, which I'm not, of course, I would bet it personally, and I might just have to sprinkle a little bit just to see what happens. But I'm not a sports bettor, you know. But that's pretty much it for our show today. You got anything else before we sign off?
No, I think that's about it. I mean, it's been a fun bowl season so far. Got a good appetizer of games for Tuesday's matchup against for Penn State and Boise State on Tuesday. So I mean, if you're not working, it's a great day to sit down and enjoy all the games on television. One game today on Monday, but yeah. Nothing else. Just looking forward to see how Tuesday's game plays out, and then Wednesday should be fun as well with three games. And I imagine those three games should be pretty much one right after the other. Correct?
I believe so.
Yeah, 1 p.m., 5 p.m., 8:45. I mean, it's
Hmm.
a nice slate of games. Obviously for Wednesday as well with three quarterfinal matchups, and then. Um, yeah, if Penn State wins on Tuesday, it's time to start, booking your
Start booking
trips
those
to
flights.
Miami.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. But yeah, Penn State 2 wins away from a national championship game appearance here. We'll see if they can get one step closer on Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. ESPN, Penn State, Boise State, at the Verbo Fiesta Bowl in Arizona.
Yep. So stay tuned. We'll have more on the channel here. If you're listening on our podcast apps, Spotify, Apple, give us a review, give us 5 stars. Really appreciate it. Helps us grow the pod. But for me and Dylan, that's another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. Signing off.